The rain was coming down in sheets, blurring the city lights, but the scene unfolding through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the upscale restaurant was agonizingly clear. It was supposed to be Madeline's 5th wedding anniversary. Instead, she stood shivering on the wet pavement, watching her husband, Damien, slip a diamond necklace around the neck of a younger, blonde woman. The real kicker? Damien's parents, Madeline's in-laws, were sitting right there at the table, raising their champagne flutes in a joyous toast. Her heart shattered, but the tears abruptly stopped. In that cold, dark moment, grief evaporated, leaving behind a razor-sharp craving for absolute, unmitigated revenge. Madeline and Damien's relationship had always looked spectacular from the outside. They were the couple everyone else aspired to be. Damien was a high-powered executive at a top-tier logistics firm in Boston, while Madeline had built a comfortable, successful career as an independent architectural consultant. They shared a sprawling suburban home, drove immaculate cars, and threw the kind of dinner parties that ended up in local lifestyle magazines. But behind the mahogany doors and the manicured lawn, the cracks had been forming for over a year. It started with the subtle shifts. Damien's phone, once carelessly tossed onto the kitchen island after work, suddenly became a permanent extension of his hand. It was always placed face down. His password, which had been their wedding date for 4 years, was quietly changed. When Madeline asked him about it one evening, while chopping vegetables for dinner, Damien had merely laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "Corporate security policy, Maddie," he had said, not meeting her eyes. "The IT guys are cracking down on everyone. It's nothing to worry about." Madeline had wanted to believe him. She was naturally trusting, perhaps to a fault, but her intuition, a quiet alarm bell in the back of her mind, began to hum. The distance between them grew, measured not in miles, but in missed dinners, aborted weekend getaways, and emotionally vacant conversations. Damien's excuses were always airtight. A sudden crisis with the supply chain, a client flying in from Tokyo who needed to be entertained, an emergency board meeting. Madeline found herself eating alone in their massive dining room more often than not, the silence of the house pressing in on her. Then there was her mother-in-law, Brenda. Brenda had never fully hidden her disdain for Madeline. To Brenda, a retired socialite who measured a person's worth by their pedigree and trust fund, Madeline, the daughter of a public school teacher and a mechanic, was an interloper. Brenda had always envisioned Damien marrying someone from her own country club circle, someone like Jessica, the daughter of a prominent local judge. Lately, Brenda's subtle digs had morphed into outright hostility. During the few family dinners Damien actually attended, Brenda would make pointed remarks about Madeline's career, her cooking, and most painfully, their lack of children. "Damien works so incredibly hard," Brenda said during a Sunday brunch, sipping her mimosa and staring coldly at Madeline. "It's a shame he doesn't have a proper home life to come back to. A man of his stature needs a wife who can prioritize his legacy, not just play around with blueprints all day." Damien had just stared at his plate, cutting his eggs, offering no defense for his wife. Madeline had swallowed the lump in her throat, excusing herself to the restroom to blink back tears. The turning point came 2 weeks before their 5th anniversary. Madeline was doing the laundry, sorting through the pockets of Damien's dry cleaning pile. Her fingers brushed against a stiff piece of paper in the inner pocket of his charcoal blazer. Pulling it out, she found a crumpled receipt from a high-end jeweler downtown. The date was from 3 days prior. The purchase was a platinum pendant necklace featuring a flawless 2-carat teardrop diamond. The price tag made Madeline dizzy, $14,000. Her heart did a frantic flutter. "Our anniversary," she thought, a sudden wave of guilt washing over her. "He bought it for our anniversary. I've been so paranoid, so suspicious, and he's planning a massive surprise." She carefully folded the receipt and slipped it back into the pocket, silently vowing to be a better, more supportive wife. She booked a private, candlelit table at Le Petit Jardin, the exclusive French restaurant where they had gone on their first date. She spent hours hunting for the perfect dress, a stunning emerald green silk slip dress that Damien had always loved the color of. She even arranged for a custom-made red velvet cake, his favorite, to be delivered to the restaurant. She was ready to hit the reset button on their marriage. She was ready to fall in love all over again. She had no idea she was preparing for a funeral. The evening of October 14th arrived, bringing with it an unseasonable, biting chill and a relentless, driving rain. Madeline stood in front of her full-length mirror, smoothing the emerald silk over her hips. She looked radiant, despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. She had spent the afternoon at the salon. Her hair fell in soft, dark waves, and her makeup was flawless. At 6 p.m., an hour before their reservation, her phone buzzed on the vanity. It was Damien. "Hey, sweetheart." His voice came through the speaker, sounding rushed and heavily stressed. In the background, Madeline could hear the muffled sounds of traffic and sirens. "Hey," she smiled, picking up her pearl earrings. "Are you on your way home to change? Or are we meeting directly at the restaurant?" There was a heavy pause on the line. The silence stretched until it felt like a physical weight in the room. "Maddie, I am so sorry," Damien finally said, sighing deeply. "It's an absolute disaster down here. The warehouse in Chicago had a catastrophic system failure. Half our inventory is unaccounted for. I'm literally on my way to the airport right now. The board wants me on the ground tonight to handle the fallout." Madeline froze, one pearl earring dangling from her fingers. "The airport? Damien, it's our 5th anniversary. You can't go to Chicago tonight. Can't someone else handle it? What about Peter?" "Peter is useless in a crisis. You know that," Damien snapped, a sharp edge entering his tone. "Look, I know it's terrible timing. I feel awful. But this is my job, Madeline. This is my livelihood. I promise, I'll make it up to you this weekend. We'll do a spa day. Whatever you want. I have to board. I love you." Before she could argue, the line went dead. Madeline stood completely still, staring at her reflection. The radiant woman in the mirror suddenly looked foolish, dressed up with nowhere to go. Tears pricked the corners of her eyes, threatening to ruin her mascara. She felt a profound, aching emptiness. It wasn't just the canceled dinner. It was the realization that she would never be his priority. She sat on the edge of the bed for almost 20 minutes, numbly listening to the rain lash against the window panes. Then, she remembered the cake. The custom red velvet cake was sitting in the walk-in refrigerator at Le Petit Jardin. She had already paid for it, a small fortune for artisanal baking, and it seemed like a tragic waste to just leave it there. A sudden, defiant spark ignited in her chest. She wasn't going to sit at home and cry in the dark. She would drive to the restaurant, pick up the cake, come home, pour herself a massive glass of Cabernet, and eat the damn cake by herself. She grabbed her trench coat and her car keys, marching out into the storm. The drive downtown was treacherous. The rain blurred the neon signs and taillights into a smeared canvas of red and yellow. When she finally pulled up to the valet stand outside Le Petit Jardin, she was thoroughly exhausted. She tipped the valet and pushed open the heavy mahogany doors. The restaurant was warm, smelling of rich truffles, roasted garlic, and expensive wine. She approached the hostess stand, pulling off her wet coat. "Good evening," Madeline said to the young hostess, offering a tight smile. "I'm Madeline Sterling. Well, I had a reservation for 2, but my husband had a work emergency. I just need to pick up a cake that was pre-ordered for our table." The hostess tapped her iPad, her brow furrowing slightly. "Sterling, let me see. Ah, yes, the red velvet cake." She paused, looking up with a slightly confused expression. "But ma'am, your party is already here." Madeline stopped breathing. My party?" "Yes." The hostess smiled warmly, oblivious to the ice forming in Madeline's veins. "The private dining room in the back. The Bordeaux room, Mr. Sterling arrived about 20 minutes ago with his guests. Shall I show you the way?" Madeline's mind reeled. Guests? Damien was supposed to be on a plane to Chicago. "No," Madeline managed to whisper, her throat suddenly dry. "No, thank you. I know the way. I'll just surprise them." She turned away from the hostess stand, her legs feeling like lead. The Bordeaux room was located at the very back of the restaurant, down a softly lit, carpeted hallway. It was an exclusive space, enclosed by heavy oak doors, with glass panels that were currently obscured by drawn, slatted blinds. As she walked down the hallway, the ambient noise of the main dining room faded away. She could hear the soft hum of conversation and laughter coming from behind the oak doors. "It's a surprise party," her desperate, fragile heart whispered. "He faked the Chicago trip. He invited our friends. This is all a big romantic setup." But as she reached the door, she recognized a high, sharp, aristocratic laugh. It was Brenda, her mother-in-law. Madeline stopped dead in her tracks. Why would Brenda be at a romantic surprise party? She stepped closer to the door, pressing herself against the wood. Through a narrow gap in the drawn blinds, she had a clear line of sight into the center of the private room. What she saw in the next 5 seconds would alter the trajectory of her life forever. The Bordeaux room was bathed in the warm, golden glow of a crystal chandelier. The table was set with the finest porcelain and polished silver. In the center of the table sat the custom red velvet cake Madeline had ordered, completely untouched. Sitting at the head of the table was Damien. He wasn't wearing his travel clothes. He was wearing his tailored Tom Ford tuxedo. Sitting to his right were his parents, Brenda and Thomas, both dressed to the nines, beaming with an unmistakable, uncharacteristic warmth. And sitting to his left, her hand resting intimately on Damien's thigh, was Jessica. Jessica, the judge's daughter. Jessica, the woman Brenda had always wanted Damien to marry. Jessica, who was wearing a stunning, plunging red gown that left her neck bare. Madeline clapped a hand over her mouth to stifle the gasp that tore its way up her throat. Her lungs burned. The world tilted violently on its axis, and she had to lean against the door frame to keep from collapsing onto the carpet. She watched, paralyzed, as Damien reached into the inner pocket of his tuxedo jacket. He pulled out a slim, black velvet box, the same box that held the $14,000 teardrop diamond. He didn't buy it for their anniversary. He bought it for her. Damien stood up, a massive, genuine smile on his face. A smile Madeline hadn't seen directed at her in years. He walked behind Jessica's chair, opened the box, and gently lifted the glittering diamond pendant. Jessica swept her blonde hair over one shoulder, giggling as Damien secured the clasp around her neck. He leaned down and kissed her softly on the cheek. Brenda clapped her hands together in delight. Thomas raised his glass of champagne. Madeline pressed her ear closer to the crack in the door, her entire body trembling violently. "To Damien and Jessica," Thomas announced, his booming voice easily carrying through the wood. "It's been a long time coming. Thank God he's finally getting his ducks in a row. To the future, and to a proper addition to the family. Cheers." Brenda and Jessica echoed. Damien took his seat, raising his own glass. "Thank you, Dad. It's a delicate process. I've spoken to the lawyers. The prenuptial agreement is solid, but we have to be smart. I need to finish transferring the offshore assets into the new LLC before I serve Madeline the papers. If she gets wind of this, before the accounts are drained, she could take half the firm. We just need to play the happy couple for another month or two." Jessica pouted playfully, running a finger around the rim of her champagne flute. "Another 2 months, Dave? I'm getting tired of sneaking around, and tonight is her anniversary. Won't she be suspicious?" Damien scoffed, taking a sip of his drink. "Madeline, please. She's completely clueless. I told her the Chicago servers went down, and she bought it hook, line, and sinker. She's probably at home right now, folding my laundry, and feeling sorry for me. She's not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed when it comes to business. Don't worry, baby. By Christmas, she'll be out of the house, and it'll just be us." Brenda leaned forward, a vicious smirk on her face. "I told you 5 years ago, Damien. You can't turn a peasant into a queen. She was a mistake, but you're fixing it now, and that's all that matters." Outside the door, the trembling stopped. The hot, blinding tears that had been threatening to fall evaporated instantly, replaced by a cold, terrifying clarity. The grief that had momentarily crushed her chest vanished, leaving behind a hollow, echoing chamber that was rapidly filling with pure, concentrated rage. Her husband of 5 years was not just having an affair, he was orchestrating a massive financial fraud to leave her penniless. And his parents, the people she had tried so desperately to please, the people she had cooked for, cared for, and respected, were cheering him on. They were celebrating his mistress on the exact night of Madeline's wedding anniversary. They were eating her cake. The old Madeline, the trusting, naive, sweet wife, died right there in the hallway of Le Petit Jardin. Slowly, methodically, she reached into her trench coat pocket and pulled out her smartphone. She didn't burst through the doors. She didn't scream or throw a glass of wine in Damien's face. That was what Brenda would expect. That was the reaction of an emotional, clueless woman. Instead, she activated her phone's video camera. She held it steady up to the gap in the blinds, hitting record. She captured everything. She captured the diamond necklace gleaming on Jessica's chest. She captured the red velvet cake. She recorded Damien's exact words about the offshore assets, the LLC, and the plan to drain the accounts before serving her divorce papers. She recorded Thomas and Brenda's complicit toasts. She stood perfectly still for 3 full minutes, gathering enough high-definition, irrefutable evidence to destroy an empire. When she finally stopped recording, she saved the file, immediately backing it up to 2 separate cloud drives. She took one last look at the laughing, treacherous family inside the room. A slow, chilling smile touched the corners of her lips. "You think I'm clueless, Damien?" she whispered into the silent hallway. "Let's see how smart you feel when you lose everything." She turned on her heel and walked back down the hallway, her stride purposeful and strong. She bypassed the hostess stand, walking out into the freezing rain. She didn't feel the cold anymore. She had a lot of work to do, and a financial war to prepare for. Damien wanted a divorce by Christmas? Fine. But Madeline was going to ensure that he would be spending the holidays in a courtroom, begging for mercy she had absolutely no intention of giving. The morning after the disastrous anniversary, the storm had passed, leaving behind a crisp, bitterly cold Boston morning. Madeline was in the kitchen at 6:30 a.m., brewing Damien's favorite dark roast coffee and frying bacon. She wore a soft cashmere sweater and a warm, loving smile that felt like a ceramic mask glued to her face. When the front door unlocked at 7:15 a.m., Damien walked in, dragging his rolling suitcase behind him. He looked suitably disheveled, no tie, the top 2 buttons of his shirt undone, dark circles under his eyes. It was a masterful performance. Had she not been standing outside the Bordeaux room the night before, she would have rushed to him, full of sympathy. "Maddie," he sighed, dropping his suitcase in the foyer and rubbing his temples. "What a nightmare. I've been up for 24 hours straight, dealing with the Chicago team." Madeline walked over, pouring him a steaming mug of coffee, and handed it to him. She didn't flinch when his fingers brushed hers. "You poor thing," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "I made a big breakfast. Sit down and eat. Did you get the server issues sorted?" Damien took a greedy sip of the coffee, missing the icy calculation in his wife's eyes. "Mostly. It's going to take a few weeks to fully stabilize, but the bleeding has stopped. I'm so sorry about last night, sweetheart. Truly." "Don't worry about it, Damien," she replied smoothly, turning back to the stove to flip the bacon. "Work comes first. We have plenty of anniversaries ahead of us." He smiled, visibly relieved that she wasn't putting up a fight. "You're the best, Maddie. I'm going to take a quick shower and then head into the office. I have to brief the board." As soon as the bathroom door clicked shut and the water started running upstairs, Madeline dropped the spatula. Her hands stopped trembling the moment she was out of his sight. She pulled out her phone, opened a secure, encrypted messaging app she had downloaded at 3 a.m., and sent a text to a number she had acquired through a trusted colleague in the architecture world. "I need an appointment today. It's an emergency." 2 hours later, Madeline was sitting in a high-rise office downtown, overlooking the harbor. Across the mahogany desk sat Victoria Higgins, the most feared and heavily priced divorce attorney in Massachusetts. Victoria was a striking woman in her 50s, wearing a sharp navy suit, her silver hair pulled back in a severe, no-nonsense bun. Madeline placed her phone on the desk and hit play on the video from the restaurant. Victoria watched in absolute silence. She didn't blink as the diamond necklace was clasped around Jessica's neck. She didn't react when Brenda and Thomas toasted to Damien's mistress. But when Damien clearly outlined his plan to drain his assets into a new LLC before serving divorce papers, the corner of Victoria's mouth twitched upward into a predatory smile. The video ended. Silence hung in the opulent office. "Well," Victoria said, leaning back and steepling her fingers, "I usually have to hire private investigators for months to get this kind of smoking gun. Your husband is arrogant, Mrs. Sterling, and arrogance makes men stupid. He thinks I'm clueless," Madeline said, her voice steady and hard. "He wants to serve me by Christmas. He's moving our money into an offshore account under a new LLC. I need to know how to stop him." "We don't just stop him, Madeline," Victoria corrected, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "We let him think he's succeeding. We let him dig the hole so deep he can't climb out. The moment he transfers marital assets into a hidden LLC with the explicit, recorded intent to defraud you in a divorce proceeding, he isn't just a cheating husband. He's committing a felony. If we play this right, you won't just get half. You'll get it all. The house, the liquid assets, his equity in the logistics firm. The judge will absolutely crucify him." Madeline felt a thrill of vindication shoot down her spine. "What do you need from me?" "I need the name of the LLC, the account numbers, and the routing information," Victoria instructed, sliding a legal pad across the desk. "Right now, we only have his verbal intent. I need the digital paper trail before we drop the guillotine. Can you get access to his home office? His personal laptop?" "He changed his phone password," Madeline admitted, frowning, "and he keeps his work laptop locked in his briefcase. But he has a home office. There's a small wall safe behind a painting cliché, I know. He thinks I don't know the combination, but I watched him open it in the mirror reflection 3 years ago. It's his mother's birthday." Victoria raised an eyebrow, impressed. "Good. Get into that safe. Take photographs of every document, every ledger, every scrap of paper. Do not remove anything. Leave it exactly as you found it. We have to act completely normal. Can you play the loving, oblivious wife for another month?" Madeline thought of Damien's exhausted lie that morning. She thought of Brenda's vicious laughter. "Victoria," Madeline said coldly, "I'm about to give the performance of a lifetime." For the next 3 weeks, Madeline was the epitome of a doting spouse. She cooked lavish dinners, ironed Damien's shirts with meticulous care, and even agreed to host a Sunday brunch for Brenda and Thomas, enduring their passive-aggressive insults with a serene, detached smile. Brenda had practically strutted into Madeline's home that Sunday, inspecting the baseboards for dust. "You know, Madeline," Brenda had sneered over her mimosa, "Jessica, Judge Caldwell's daughter, just hosted a charity gala for the symphony. Over 500 guests. That's the kind of woman who really knows how to support a community's upper echelon. Not that your little building projects aren't quaint." Madeline had simply smiled, pouring Brenda more champagne. "Jessica sounds remarkably talented, Brenda. I'm sure she has a very bright future." Damien had choked slightly on his bacon, shooting Madeline a quick, paranoid glance, but her expression was perfectly innocent. The panic in his eyes was delicious. Behind the scenes, however, Madeline was operating like a covert operative. Getting into the wall safe had been easy. One Tuesday afternoon, while Damien was at a late client dinner, which Madeline now knew was code for Jessica's downtown loft, she slipped into his study. She swung the heavy landscape painting aside, entered Brenda's birthday into the keypad, and heard the satisfying click of the heavy steel door. Inside, she found what she was looking for, a thick manila folder labeled Summit Holdings, LLC. Her hands shook slightly as she photographed the documents with her phone. The paperwork confirmed everything. Damien was funneling hundreds of thousands of dollars, bonuses, stock dividends, and joint savings into a shell corporation registered in Delaware. From there, the money was being wired to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. But there was a problem. The documents in the safe only showed the domestic transfers to Delaware. To completely lock the trap, Victoria needed the offshore account numbers and the digital transfer receipts. Those were strictly on Damien's phone and his locked laptop. Madeline needed a Trojan horse. She reached out to an old college friend, Benjamin, who now ran an elite corporate cybersecurity firm in Seattle. She didn't tell him the whole story, only that she was locked out of a joint account and needed a discreet way to bypass a passcode on a shared device. Benjamin, sensing the urgency, overnighted her a small, innocuous-looking device that resembled a standard phone charging cable. "It's a data skimmer," Benjamin had explained over a secure call. "Plug it into a wall outlet and plug his phone into it. It will charge the phone normally, but the microchip inside the cable will clone the device's backup and record the passcode keystrokes. It takes about 10 minutes. Just make sure he doesn't unplug it." The opportunity presented itself on a Thursday night. Damien came home complaining of a severe migraine. He tossed his phone onto the kitchen counter and announced he was going to take a long, hot shower. "Let me run the water for you," Madeline offered, playing the attentive wife. "I'll put your phone on the charger in the bedroom so it's fully juiced for tomorrow." "Thanks, Maddie," he grunted, rubbing his eyes. "You're a lifesaver." As soon as Damien trudged upstairs, Madeline practically flew into action. She swapped his regular charging cord with Benjamin's rigged cable, plugging it into the outlet behind the nightstand. She connected Damien's phone. A tiny, imperceptible green light flashed on the base of the cord, indicating the data transfer had begun. She paced the bedroom floor, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. From the ensuite bathroom, she could hear the shower running. 10 minutes. Just 10 minutes. At the 6-minute mark, the water suddenly shut off. Madeline froze. She heard the squeak of the glass shower door opening. "Maddie?" Damien called out, his voice echoing in the tiled bathroom. "Did you take the fresh towels out of the closet?" Panic flared in her chest. If he walked out here and saw the unfamiliar cable, or checked his phone before the clone was complete, the entire operation would be blown. "Yes, I have them right here," she shouted back. She grabbed a towel from the bed, practically throwing herself toward the bathroom door, just as Damien stepped out, dripping wet. She wrapped the towel around his shoulders, physically blocking his view of the nightstand. "You're freezing," she cooed, rubbing his arms vigorously. "Get dressed quickly. I'll go warm up some soup for you." "Thanks," he mumbled, shivering. She lingered for a torturous 3 more minutes, making small talk about his day, until she saw the tiny green light on the charger blink twice and go dark. The transfer was complete. "I'll be right down," Damien said, turning toward the bed. Madeline quickly stepped past him, casually unplugging his phone and handing it to him while simultaneously slipping the rigged cable into the pocket of her cardigan. "Here's your phone, fully charged." That night, while Damien slept soundly beside her, dreaming of his new life with Jessica, Madeline sat in her downstairs office. She connected the rigged cable to her own laptop. Within minutes, she had full access to his mirrored device. She bypassed the passcode with the keystrokes Benjamin's device had logged. She opened Damien's secure banking app, and there it was. The offshore Cayman account, the routing numbers, the exact balance of $1, $2 million money that legally belonged to both of them. Money he had siphoned away over the last 14 months. She forwarded the entire digital dossier to Victoria Higgins. The next morning, Victoria called her. "We have him, Madeline. Checkmate. I can draft the filings today, and we can have him served by Monday. We'll freeze his assets before he even knows what hit him." "No," Madeline said, staring out the kitchen window at the frost-covered lawn. "No?" Victoria asked, confused. "Madeline, if we wait, there's a risk." "I'm not waiting out of hesitation, Victoria," Madeline interrupted, a dark, venomous thrill lacing her words. "Damien's logistics firm is hosting their annual winter gala next Friday. It's their biggest corporate event of the year. Investors, board members, local politicians, everyone will be there. Damien told me yesterday that he didn't want me to go, that it was just a boring boardroom thing, and I should stay home and relax. Victoria let out a low whistle over the line. Let me guess. He's taking the judge's daughter. Exactly, Madeline said. His parents will be there too, parading her around to his colleagues as his new, upgraded partner. He thinks he's untouchable. And you want to touch him? Victoria deduced, her voice purring with approval. I don't just want to serve him papers in an office, Victoria. I want to burn his empire to the ground in front of everyone he respects. Madeline took a deep breath, clutching her coffee mug tightly. Draft the papers. Get the emergency injunction to freeze the Summit Holdings LLC accounts and his personal assets. But don't serve him yet. Send a process server to the Winter Gala next Friday. I'll make sure the timing is absolutely perfect. The week leading up to the Winter Gala was a masterclass in psychological endurance. Madeline felt as though she were living two lives. In one, she was the ghost of a wife, a woman Damien barely noticed as he hummed tunes in the shower and made business calls from the balcony. In the other, she was a general in a war room, coordinating with Victoria and Benjamin to ensure every digital and legal landmine was primed for detonation. Damien's arrogance had reached a fever pitch. He had become sloppy, fueled by the intoxicating belief that he was weeks away from a multi-million-dollar fresh start with Jessica. He stopped hiding the scent of unfamiliar perfume on his collars. He barely bothered to create elaborate excuses for his late nights, often just offering a distracted, "Don't wait up," before disappearing into the Boston fog. On Wednesday, 2 days before the gala, Madeline found Damien in his walk-in closet, admiring a new tuxedo, a deep midnight blue silk that cost more than most people's cars. "It's for the gala," he said, not looking at her as he adjusted the lapels in the mirror. "I really wish you could come, Maddie. I do. But the board is on edge because of the Chicago situation. It's going to be all strategy and logistics talk. You'd be bored to tears. Why don't you take that weekend trip to the Cape you've been talking about? My treat." He reached into his pocket and tossed a credit card onto the dresser. It was a secondary card, one not linked to the accounts he was currently draining. Madeline picked it up, feeling the cold plastic in her palm. "You're so thoughtful, Damien. A weekend at the Cape sounds exactly like what I need. Some peace and quiet to think about our future." "Exactly," he said, finally turning to give her a quick, hollow peck on the forehead. "The future. It's going to look very different soon. I count on it," she whispered to his retreating back. As soon as he left for the office, Madeline's phone buzzed. It was Victoria. "The injunctions are signed," the lawyer stated, her voice crisp and devoid of hesitation. "As of 9 a.m. this morning, Summit Holdings LLC is under a federal freeze. The Cayman accounts are flagged. If Damien tries to move so much as $1, a silent alarm goes off at the bank and with the forensic accountants. He doesn't know yet, because the banks are required to hold the notification for 48 hours under the fraud statutes we invoked. He will find out tomorrow night at the exact moment you choose." "And the process server?" Madeline asked, her heart racing. "His name is Anthony. He's a former offensive lineman for a college team. He's professional, discreet, and impossible to intimidate. He'll be at the Museum of Fine Arts at 8:30 p.m. He'll be wearing a tuxedo, looking like just another donor. He has the papers for the divorce, the lawsuit for the fraudulent transfer of assets, and a temporary restraining order barring Damien from the house." "Perfect," Madeline said. "Now, about the presentation. Benjamin is ready," Victoria confirmed. "He's bypassed the gala's media server. The museum uses a centralized system for the rolling slideshow of sponsors and the keynote video. At 8:45 p.m., when the CEO of Damien's firm, Mr. Adler, stands up to give the annual toast, Benjamin will override the feed. Instead of the year in review video, the entire room will see your little movie from Le Petit Jardin." Madeline leaned against the kitchen counter, closing her eyes. She felt a strange mixture of terror and triumph. She was about to humiliate not just Damien, but the entire family that had treated her like a disposable footnote in their grand story. "One more thing, Victoria," Madeline said. "I want to be there. I want to see Brenda's face when she realizes the peasant she looked down on just took everything she values "I wouldn't miss it for the world," Victoria replied. "I've arranged a car, and Madeline, wear something they'll never forget." Friday arrived with a heavy, gray sky and a dusting of snow that coated the brownstones of Back Bay. Damien left the house early, claiming he had to oversee the setup at the museum. He was vibrating with an energy. Madeline recognized it was the thrill of the hunt. He thought he was about to debut his new life. Madeline spent the afternoon at a high-end boutique she had never dared to frequent before, using a personal account Damien didn't even know existed, her rainy day fund she had built from her own architectural consulting fees over the years. She chose a gown of liquid gold sequins, with a high neck and a daring open back. It was bold, architectural, and screamed of power. She had her hair styled in a sleek, high ponytail and chose a dark, vampy red for her lips. When she looked in the mirror, she didn't see the clueless wife Damien had mocked. She saw a woman who had survived a betrayal and was coming back as a reckoning. At 7:45 p.m., a black town car pulled into her driveway. Madeline stepped out of her house, locking the door behind her. She didn't look back at the suburban mansion that had become her cage. She knew that by tomorrow, she would be the only one with the keys. The Museum of Fine Arts was a vision of opulence. Searchlights swept the sky, and the grand entrance was lined with a red carpet protected by a heated canopy. The city's elite were out-in-force men in sharp black tie and women in furs and silks, their diamonds catching the light of the flashes from the local press. Madeline stayed in the car, watching through the tinted windows. At 8:10 p.m., a sleek silver Audi pulled up. Damien stepped out, looking every bit the successful executive. He walked around to the passenger side and opened the door. Jessica stepped out, her blonde hair coiffed to perfection, wearing a white gown that looked suspiciously like a wedding dress. She looked young, vibrant, and utterly smug. A moment later, Brenda and Thomas pulled up in their vintage Rolls-Royce. Brenda was draped in a floor-length mink coat, her pearls gleaming. She took Jessica's arm with a maternal warmth she had never once shown. Madeline, laughing as they moved toward the entrance as one cohesive, proper family. Madeline felt the familiar sting of rejection, but this time it was followed by a cold, sharpening focus. "Go," she told the driver. She entered through a side entrance reserved for vendors and staff, a path Benjamin had cleared for her. She navigated the marble corridors of the museum, moving toward the grand hall where the gala dinner was being held. She found a spot in the shadows of the mezzanine gallery. Overlooking the sea of tables, the room was breathtaking. Thousands of white lilies filled the air with a cloying scent. The crystal centerpieces reflected the candlelight. At the head table sat the firm's executive board, including the CEO, Mr. Adler, a man who valued family integrity above all else in his corporate culture. Damien, Jessica, Brenda, and Thomas were seated at a prime table right at the front, next to the podium. Damien had his arm around Jessica's chair, leaning in to whisper in her ear. Brenda was holding court with the wife of a local senator, gesturing toward Jessica with a pride that was nauseating. Madeline checked her watch. 8:30 p.m. Below her, near the bar, she saw a tall, broad-shouldered man in a tuxedo. He was carrying a slim, leather portfolio. He caught Madeline's eye for a split second and gave a single, imperceptible nod. Anthony was in position. The wait was agonizing. She watched Damien toast his father. She watched Jessica preen for the photographers. She watched the clueless narrative they had built around her being used as a joke in their hushed conversations. At 8:40 p.m., the lights in the hall dimmed. The chatter subsided as Mr. Adler walked up to the podium. "Good evening, everyone," Adler began, his voice echoing through the vaulted ceiling. "As we gather tonight to celebrate another year of unprecedented growth for our firm, we also celebrate the values that make us strong: innovation, resilience, and above all, the families that support us. Before we begin the main course, I'd like to share a brief look at the faces and milestones of the past 12 months. Adler gestured toward the massive projection screens that flanked the stage. The music started a soaring, inspirational orchestral track. The screen flickered to life. For the first 30 seconds, it was the standard corporate fare. Warehouse openings, charity events, Damien shaking hands with clients. Then, the screen glitched. A static pop echoed through the speakers. The music cut out abruptly, replaced by a low, ambient hum. Damien frowned, looking toward the AV booth at the back of the room. Adler looked confused, tapping the microphone. It seems we have a technical... Suddenly, the screen filled with a grainier, handheld video feed. The setting was unmistakable. The Bordeaux room at Le Petit Jardin. The silence that fell over the museum was so absolute, it felt physical. On the screen, Damien's voice rang out, crystal clear. If she gets wind of this before the accounts are drained, she could take half the firm. We just need to play the happy couple for another month or two. The camera zoomed in on the $14,000 diamond necklace around Jessica's neck. Then, it pounced on Brenda's face as she sneered. I told you 5 years ago, Damien, you can't turn a peasant into a queen. In the grand hall, Damien's face went from confused to a ghostly, sickly white. Jessica's hand flew to the necklace, the same one she was wearing tonight, as if it had suddenly turned into a serpent. Adler froze, his mouth hanging open as he watched one of his top executives admit to financial fraud and marital deception on a 40-foot screen. The video played for 3 agonizing minutes. It ended with Damien's laugh. She's probably at home right now, folding my laundry. She's not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed. The screen went black. The lights didn't come up. For 5 seconds, the room remained in darkness, the weight of the betrayal hanging in the air like smoke. Then, the house lights slammed on. Anthony, the process server, didn't hesitate. He marched straight to the head table. With a grace that belied his size, he stepped past a paralyzed Brenda and dropped the thick leather portfolio directly onto Damien's dinner plate, splashing a drop of expensive soup onto his midnight blue lapel. Damien Holloway? Anthony's voice boomed, cutting through the rising murmurs of the crowd. You've been served. Divorce, civil fraud, and an emergency asset freeze. Do not attempt to use your credit cards tonight. They won't work. Damien stared at the papers as if they were an explosive. He looked up, his eyes darting frantically around the room, meeting the horrified, disgusted stares of his colleagues, his boss, and the city's most influential figures. Brenda let out a sharp, strangled cry. This is an outrage. Who did this? Damien, do something. But Damien couldn't do anything. He was watching a figure descend the grand marble staircase at the back of the hall. Madeline stepped into the light, her gold gown shimmering like a flame. She walked slowly, deliberately, the click of her heels, the only sound in the cavernous room. She didn't stop until she was standing 5 feet from their table. She didn't look at Jessica, who was trying to hide behind her menu. She didn't look at Brenda, who was hyperventilating into a silk napkin. She looked directly at Damien. I finished the laundry, Damien, she said, her voice calm and terrifyingly cold. But I think you'll find your bags are already on the sidewalk. And by the way, gold looks much better on me than diamonds do on her. The chaos that erupted in the Museum of Fine Arts after Madeline's exit was the talk of the Boston social scene for the next 3 years. It became known as the Gilded Reckoning. Damien's fall from grace was instantaneous and total. Mr. Adler, a man who built his brand on New England integrity, fired Damien before the gala was even officially over. A man who would defraud his own wife of 5 years was not someone the firm could trust with a multi-billion-dollar supply chain. But the professional ruin was only the beginning. Because Madeline and Victoria had moved so quickly, the Summit Holdings LLC accounts were seized by the court-appointed receiver within 48 hours. The $2 million Damien had painstakingly siphoned off was returned to the marital estate. Because Damien had documented his intent to defraud his wife on video, the judge in their divorce case was merciless. Madeline was awarded the house, the cars, and 80% of their liquid assets as a bad faith settlement. Damien's life with Jessica crumbled just as quickly. Without the promise of a multi-million-dollar windfall, the judge's daughter found that Damien was much less appealing. The scandal tarnished her father's reputation as well, and within months, she had moved to Europe to escape the relentless whispers of the country club set. Brenda and Thomas fared no better. Their legacy was shattered. The social circles they lived for, the charity boards, the opera committees, the exclusive luncheons, closed their doors. Brenda's name became synonymous with the peasant remark, a phrase that was mocked in every gossip column in the city. They were forced to sell their estate and move to a much smaller property in Florida, far away from the eyes of the people they had once tried so hard to impress. 6 months after the gala, Madeline stood in the foyer of her home, now hers, alone. The sterling name she had once shared with Damien was gone. She had reverted to her maiden name, Madeline Thorne. The house felt different now. It didn't feel like a museum of a failed marriage. She had stripped away the heavy curtains Brenda had insisted on and repainted the walls in warm, vibrant colors. She was sitting at her mahogany desk, the same one where she used to fold Damien's shirts, working on a new set of blueprints. She wasn't an independent consultant anymore. After the gala, her story had gone viral in the architectural community. People were drawn to her strength, her eye for detail, and her refusal to be a victim. She had more commissions than she could handle. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Victoria. The final papers are signed. The house is officially in your name only. And Damien's last appeal for the offshore funds was denied this morning. It's over, Madeline. You won. Madeline set the phone down and walked to the window. Outside, the spring sun was reflecting off the Charles River. She felt a lightness in her chest she hadn't felt in years. She had watched her in-laws celebrate her husband's lover. She had felt the crushing weight of a 5-year lie. But she hadn't let it break her. She had used their own arrogance as the fuel for her fire. She walked into the kitchen and poured herself a glass of chilled white wine. She thought about the red velvet cake that had been eaten by traitors in the Bordeaux room. She thought about the diamond necklace that was now sitting in a police evidence locker as part of a civil fraud suit. She raised her glass to her reflection in the darkened window. To the future, she whispered, mirroring Damien's toast from that night, and to the woman who was smart enough to build it for herself. Madeline Thorne didn't need a king, a pedigree, or a diamond. She had her own blueprints, a solid foundation, and the knowledge that sometimes the best way to move on is to make sure the people who hurt you never forget the day they tried to make you small. She took a sip of the wine, smiled, and went back to her work. The sun was setting on the old life, but for the first time, Madeline wasn't afraid of the dark. Madeline's journey from a betrayed wife to a powerhouse of her own making is a testament to the fact that revenge is a dish best served with meticulous planning and a touch of gold sequins. She didn't just survive the storm, she became the storm, washing away the pretenses and lies of the people who thought they could break her. Damien, Brenda, and Jessica learned a bitter lesson. Never mistake kindness for weakness, and never, ever assume the person you're betraying isn't 3 steps ahead of you. If you were inspired by Madeline's incredible comeback and want to see more stories of justice being served in the most dramatic ways possible, make sure to like this video and share it with anyone who needs a reminder of their own strength. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you're the first to know when our next real-life drama drops. What would you have done in Madeline's shoes? Let us know in the comments below.